This is the Santa Catalina Channel, a 26-mile-wide stretch of the Pacific Ocean separating the city of Los Angeles from Catalina Island. According to experts, these waters, portions of which might be as deep as Mount Everest is high, may contain some of the world's darkest mysteries.
You are seeing an unidentified flying object. It is not a hoax. It is real. The film was taken by Leland Hansen while filming Catalina Island from a helicopter.
In recent years, escalating reports of unidentified submerged objects, or USOs, flying into and out of the channel have caused great concern to local residents and researchers.
The whole area here is just a huge hotbed of UFO activity. I've uncovered probably 200-300 cases of UFOs flying over the mountains and over the water here. It's just a huge hotspot.
Preston Dennett is the author of UFOs over California. He has been investigating USO activity in this area for almost 20 years.
Actually, there was a huge wave of sightings over the Santa Monica mountain range on June 14, 1992. The witnesses counted a total of about 200 objects. What's interesting about this case is these objects came from below. Normally when someone sees a UFO, it comes out of the sky like a star. They see a star-like object and it comes swooping down. These came from below to above.
June 14th, 1992, 10:24 p.m. For almost 2 minutes, the waters of the Pacific Ocean explode with light as hundreds of bright, disc-like craft are witnessed flying out of the water together. Similar to other reports of USOs exiting the water, these craft emerge from the Pacific in almost complete silence. They reportedly hover for a moment before bursting into space. Reports of this incident were phoned into local police departments as far away as Malibu. The following is an actual call that was placed on that day.
Officer, Sheriff Station. Did anyone report anything strange tonight? Can you be a little more specific? Strange. Lights. Lights? Yes. What exactly happened to you? I'm ashamed to tell you because I think you're going to think I'm crazy. We saw what we thought was a bright light up in the sky. Okay. We could hear it wasn't a helicopter. I'm telling you, I have never been more frightened in my life.
According to Dennett, the incident was also reported to the U.S. Coast Guard sector in Long Beach, which ultimately declined the search request. This 1992 event was the second in Los Angeles in 3 years. On the dark, foggy morning of February 7th, 1989, scuba divers, boat sonar systems, and people on the shore witness a long, dark, unidentified craft dive out of the Pacific. For about 90 seconds, the USO rests just above the surface before emitting about a dozen smaller, fast-moving objects. 60 seconds later, the craft dives back underwater. Its last reported sonar heading was south toward the Santa Catalina Channel before it disappeared.
And it involved dozens of objects which were seen off the coast of Marina del Rey. On occasion, some of these craft would emit smaller craft, about 20 feet in diameter. And these were seen moving underneath the surface of the ocean, and they were coming in and out of the water.
As the 1947 incident at Roswell sparked worldwide curiosity about flying saucers, these events near Los Angeles have sparked a current wave of research into the capabilities and threats of so-called USOs.
The oceans of the world covering, 70% of the planet, they hide a lot of history and a lot of mystery.
There's a very good reason for a whole society of creatures, sentient creatures, advanced creatures living underwater because they can, because nobody goes there.
It's fascinating to think of the underwater UFOs because they know a lot about this planet that you and I don't know.
Unique to the USO phenomenon is the reported ability of these craft to multiply and break apart. One such astounding case has become known as the Golfo Nuevo event. On February 8, 1960, the Argentinian Navy is on alert as they track two unidentified submarine-like objects in its waters, thought to be American subs. Then, according to reports, the underwater objects are seen on sonar to break apart and fly out of the water.
Sonar contact, 173, 438 yards. Bridge combat, sonar contact, 173, 438 yards.
Two gigantic submarines sighted by the Argentinian Navy in 1960 inexplicably multiplied into 6 other submarine objects. The Argentinians were never able to catch them or destroy them because the objects simply disappeared.
The case even caught the attention of the Soviet Union's most senior officials.
Nikita Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, was so much intrigued by the whole story that he sent his diplomatic attaché in Buenos Aires to find out what's been going on.
While some researchers contend that these reported cases might be nothing more than military submarines firing torpedoes, others argue that submarines were not capable of firing 6 or more objects in 1960. Late USO researcher Ivan T. Sanderson's 1970 book, Invisible Residents, was the first to analyze the USO phenomenon. He reports on another remarkable example of USO behavior. In March 1963, the U.S. Navy submarine exercise is progressing as planned 100 miles off Puerto Rico. Suddenly, one Navy sub abruptly breaks from its assigned route after picking up an unidentified object traveling at speeds in excess of 150 knots. The submarines are astonished by the depth at which the unidentified craft is moving, 20,000 feet underwater.
It gave the acoustic signature of a single propeller type of motion through the water, and it was tracked at depths down to 20,000 feet, whereas a typical crush depth for a submarine would be 7,000 feet. So this thing, whatever it was exceeding the technical capabilities of submarines at that time and even today.
The vessel is tracked for almost 4 days by the entire carrier group. The object would reportedly propel away at impossible speeds and then stop and rest, allowing for continued tracking by the Navy. Reports about this event were sent back to Sinclair Fleet Headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. However, an official determination into what was seen on sonar that afternoon was never made. But according to reports, the Navy lost track of the craft after midnight on the 4th day. It was never picked up on sonar again.
Nobody advanced a theory as to how somebody could move that fast.
We have reports of USOs going into and out of the water, but we don't have any of the technical data. Flying saucers that are above the ground, people see them. But what's underwater, the Navy sees them. And the Navy isn't talking about what it's finding.
Inflating an immense balloon aboard the USS Norton Sound, the Navy prepares for further study of the elusive cosmic rays somewhere in the Pacific. That's the news. A secondary consideration clears up the mystery of the so-called flying saucers. For it is these monsters which rise 19 miles and attain diameters of 100 feet that have been mistaken for the apparitions called flying saucers. At great altitudes, they tell us, these elongated enormities flatten out like plates. Mystery ended.
But reports from around the world continue. Another extraordinary case is reported in the international press beginning on November 11th, 1972. A fast-moving submarine-like object is picked up on sonar in the Sonja Fjord off the west coast of Norway by the Norwegian Navy, which hunts it for 2 weeks. A fleet of surface ships and specially equipped sub-hunter helicopters are assembled to find the object. On November 20th, 1972, the USO is seen visually for the first time. It was described as being a massive, silent, cigar-shaped object. A Navy ship promptly fires its guns and torpedoes at the craft.
Some ship actually saw it on the surface and fired at it, but it dived, and then they started dropping depth charges. Although all the articles treat this as a submarine, the fact of the matter is nobody was able to identify it as a submarine.
After tracking the object for almost 2 weeks, the Navy devises and executes a plan to blockade the fjord and trap the USO.
They tried to seal off this fjord so nothing could get in or out. Nevertheless, after 14 or 15 days, this thing disappeared. So that may mean that this object, whatever it was tracked by the Navy, was not a submarine at all, but an unidentified submerged object.
Coming up, did Christopher Columbus and his crew witness USOs flying into and out of the Atlantic on October 11th, 1492?
One of the earlier cases comes all the way back from the day before Columbus Day in 1492, before there was a Columbus Day. And it happened on the Santa Maria.
October 11th, 1492, 10 p.m. A calm, clear night. Christopher Columbus and his crew move slowly across one of the deepest ravines of the Atlantic and through the Bermuda Triangle. Below them is almost 4 miles of water. Suddenly, unearthly lights are seen flashing across the bottom of the ocean.
One of the earlier cases comes all the way back from the day before Columbus Day in 1492, before there was a Columbus Day. And it happened on the Santa Maria. This person's name was Gutierrez. And Gutierrez was on the Santa Maria with Christopher Columbus and noticed an object rising out of the water, a disc-shaped object.
A great flash of light with a level of brilliance unlike anything known at the time suddenly erupts from the sea to the sky, startling Columbus and his crew of 120 aboard the 3-ship Spanish fleet. In less than 5 hours, they would discover the New World.
Christopher Columbus maintained a log in the ship. It describes what could be interpreted as a UFO event. They saw, in the description given in the logbook, the flickering of a wax candle going up and down in the night. It couldn't have been a campfire on ground because it was beyond the horizon.
This possible USO incident is more than just legend and lore. For the first time ever, original text from Columbus's log has been made available to the History Channel by archivists at Fordham University, custodian of a rare handwritten copy of the journal. The October 11th, 1492 sighting was not an isolated occurrence. Over the 2-month journey, Columbus's log exhibits a consistent pattern of cryptically reported peculiar incidents, including unexplained sightings and unusual events in outer space. The following is from an entry on September 10th, 1492, the halfway point of the voyage.
The crew of the Nina stated they had seen a garajo and a water wagtail, but these birds never go farther than 25 leagues from the land.
From an entry September 11th, 1492.
Saw a large fragment of the mast of a vessel, apparently of 120 tons, but could not pick it up.
Entries on both September 17th and September 20th indicate that stars or other unidentified lights in the sky are seen to move.
The cause was that the star moved from its place, but the needles remained stationary.
And from the infamous entry of October 11th.
The Admiral, at 10 o'clock that evening, standing on the quarterdeck, saw a light. Calling to Pero Gutierrez, he told him he saw a light and bid him look that way, which he did and saw it. The Admiral again perceived it once or twice, appearing like the light of a wax candle, moving up and down.
Is it possible that these strange events, recorded during the most fabled nautical journey in history, were the result of otherworldly vessels tracking Columbus's fleet? Some suggest, however, that any interpretations or rationalizations that might be gleaned from Columbus's log are not the whole truth.
If Christopher Columbus saw a strange thing come out of the water, fly around his ship, and then take off, would he have told anybody about it? They'd have locked him up in the brig instantly. The guy's crazy, because things can't do that.
One of the earliest USO reports comes from 329 BC. After witnessing what he described as shining shield-like objects flying into and out of the Jaxartes River in India, Alexander the Great was so convinced that he witnessed otherworldly vessels, he spent the final 6 years of his life searching for evidence of these objects in a diving bell, believed to be the world's first submarine. Some conclude, however, that Alexander's underwater adventures had a greater goal, finding and conquering the one kingdom that had eluded him, Atlantis.
Well, Atlantis first enters literary history in the philosophical dialogues of Plato. These are the Timaeus and the Critias.
The gods, bothered by the attitude of the Atlanteans, decided to destroy Atlantis. In one day and one night, they destroyed it with a cataclysm, and it sank.
To this day, researchers continue to speculate about Atlantis as a hub of USO activity.
The legend of Atlantis definitely is based on knowledge, probably lost by today, of some secret underwater civilization.
Atlantis's supposed location in the Mediterranean would have provided USOs a convenient position from which to monitor human civilizations and their shipping routes to and from Asia Minor, Rome, and Athens.
The Mediterranean was the cradle of ancient civilization. The Phoenician traders traveled back and forth between the Middle East and Greece across the Mediterranean. If there were a culture of either aliens or original inhabitants of planet Earth who wanted to seed the planet, to seed humanity with myth, the Mediterranean is a natural base for them to set up an underwater facility.
Well, I don't know if Plato was talking about unidentified submerged objects when he came up with Atlantis, but I suppose there are people who, number one, assume that Atlantis is real, number two, that it's somewhere in the Atlantic, number three, that's buried under thousands of feet of water.
The ancient Athenians, however, were not the first to record stories of unidentified objects in the oceans. Experts believe the ancient Egyptians may have even recorded sightings in their hieroglyphic drawings.
In ancient Egypt, in the temple at the city of Abydos, somebody made an inscription, a depiction of a submarine. There was another depiction of an object that looks like a helicopter. Who made it? How did the ancient Egyptians know about it? We have no idea.
One of the earliest European cases is a series of reported English sightings in the 11th century.
One of the oldest cases I have on the site goes back to the year 1067. It has to do with this people in the countryside seeing something flaming in the sky that came down to earth, lit up the countryside, and then went up again, and then into the sea.
Carl Feint has been researching USO phenomenon for almost a decade. His internet site, waterufo.net, has an archive of over 900 current and historic USO reports. According to Feint, one of the 20th century's first cases was reported in detail in the Philadelphia Inquirer on August 1st, 1904. A British cargo ship, the Mohican, en route to Philadelphia was, according to the paper, enshrouded in a strange metallic vapor which glowed like phosphorus.
I have found out recently that that case is a heck of a lot more detailed and scary than originally shown. The captain and the crew confirmed that an object came across the ocean, a cloud, approached the ship, and it was glowing. Not a meteor, going straight down. It's coming across the sea. As it came towards the ship, the captain was trying to distract the crew to get them to do something different, you know, and get over the fear. They couldn't move anything while the cloud was around the ship.
The Inquirer further reports that during the event, the ship's compass revolved with the speed of an electric motor, and the sailors were unable to raise pieces of steel from the magnetized decks. The story goes on to quote the Mohican's Captain Urquhart, who confirms that the account is vouched for by every man of the crew. But perhaps the most astounding USO-related event, according to experts, is a Canadian case from 1967.
The Shag Harbor case is the most important USO case in documentation. The UFO moved underwater to a different point. A second UFO joined it.
Coming up, we visit Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia on the 38th anniversary of this crucial USO incident.
On October the 4th, 1967. That's where the lights was, right behind me on the water.
years ago today, October 4th, 1967, approximately 20 after 11 in the evening, something happened in Shag Harbor that became quite memorable in later years.
The night of October 4th, 67 has become known as the Night of the UFOs among many UFO researchers. The Shag Harbor incident has become the best known aspect of that night.
Chris Stiles and Don Ledger have spent the past decade researching the 1967 Shag Harbor USO incident. The case, widely reported throughout Canada at the time, had been largely forgotten in subsequent years. Their 2001 book, Dark Object, reopened the case, shedding new light on the many reported USO events of that night and the weeks following.
The reason that the Shag Harbor incident came to the forefront and kind of eclipsed the importance of the other sightings from the Night of the UFOs is simply the fact that it's the one case where something came down out of the sky and crashed into the water. You know, it made a noise, it made a flash. It's also unique in the sense that nobody reported a UFO. Several calls came in very quickly to the nearby Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment, and those reports said simply that people had seen lights, or perhaps an aircraft had crashed into the waters of what they called the Sound. The interest and the concern was totally for the possibility of survivors. Nobody reported a UFO.
I'm not surprised now that I had seen something in the sky that night, because all over Nova Scotia, the night of the Shag Harbor incident, there were many UFO reports.
Just up around the bend, we'll be coming into Shag Harbor, and the site crowd gathered and watched whatever it was that happened here 38 years ago today.
Each year, Ledger and Stiles make an anniversary trip to Shag Harbor to meet with Norm Smith, one of only 3 surviving witnesses.
See the island out there? That's where it all took place, right off there. That's where we seen the light in the water.
Hey, sir. How you been?
Good.
Wow.
How are you?
Same old, that's good.
The 3 of us stood on the lawn watching the lights. Eventually it started going, it looked like it was moving to us, and then on a downward slope towards the ground, we thought it was a plane crash. So we jumped in the vehicle in my old man's car and my uncle's, and we went up to this spot right here by the Irish Moss plant. And when we got here, there was probably 10, 12 other people. We watched the lights on the water for a period of 2 or 3 minutes, and then the lights disappeared.
What happens next is indisputable. Before midnight on Wednesday, October 4th, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers who witnessed the event from the shoreline searched the water on boats until 3 a.m. with the help of several local fishermen, including Norm Smith. At noon on Friday, October 6th, Canadian Navy divers from Halifax arrive and search the area through the weekend.
Eventually, 7 divers were dispatched from the Fleet Diving Unit in Halifax and taken down to Shag Harbor. The search effort continued through all the daylight hours of Saturday and Sunday, and by Monday morning that search was officially terminated in Ottawa. And they just simply state unidentified flying object and circle it and underline it.
According to government reports, the object travels from the south to the north along the Nova Scotia shoreline. At one point, it stops and hovers. Then at approximately 11:20 p.m., it enters the water at a 45-degree angle, 300 yards offshore.
Directly behind me where we seen the lights, right at Bomb Portage Island, directly behind me.
When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that had responded to the call arrived at the shoreline of Old Highway number 3, the UFO was still moving upon the surface of the water. The object also appeared to be leaving a trail of dense yellow foam.
In the weeks following October 4th, the story becomes even more mysterious. The case is front-page news across Canada, and as Ledger and Stiles report in their book, in the days just prior to the Canadian military's official classification of this incident as a UFO event, a second craft enters the waters of Nova Scotia to rendezvous with the first craft.
Then this thing resumed its headway back down this way at about 4,400 miles an hour and came down through northern New Brunswick, straight down over the Bay of Fundy, across the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia, across this way, and went down in the water here.
Authorities already knew the object was no longer there, that it had moved under the water and had come to rest on the seabed. It sat there for almost a week, right to the hour. And after that time, it began moving under the water to the Gulf of Maine with the aid of a second craft that was helping repair it. And the two of them broke the surface of the water and flew away out over the Gulf of Maine. Interestingly enough, there is a second report of a sighting 1 week in Shag Harbor of two sets of lights, one orange, one yellow, leaving the water and flying away.
This case continues to inspire debate and continued research into the events of October 4th, 1967.
There are a large amount of primary documents that support interpreting Shag Harbor as a crash scenario of a UFO. And in one of the paragraphs it actually says a preliminary investigation has been conducted and it has been discovered that this object is not the result of a flare, float, downed aircraft, or in fact any known object.
I didn't know then, back 30-odd years ago, I didn't know whether it was a UFO or what it was. But nobody will ever make me believe that there was nothing there, because it was.
Coming up, seen for the first time, video evidence of what might possibly be a USO emerging from the waters of Laguna Cartagena in Puerto Rico.
And they are coming towards Laguna Cartagena.
And later, a University of California scientist reveals that supersonic speed by deep-sea UFOs is not only scientifically possible, but likely. A region with perhaps the longest legacy of USO activity is the area around Puerto Rico. As the mysterious southern point of the Bermuda Triangle, the island has been at the center of USO debate for decades.
Puerto Rico is a hotspot for underwater UFO activity, and it seems to match the pattern of other cases.
Puerto Rico is considered in all of the Americas to be the place where there's the greatest number of USO sightings.
Members of the Puerto Rican-based ufology group, Project Argus, agreed to lead a tour of some of the island's more notable USO-related areas. Laguna Cartagena is an isolated lake near the southwestern corner of the island. It has become linked to much of Puerto Rico's reported USO activity.
I have been conducting investigations for years in Laguna Cartagena, where there's also a lot of secrecy about USOs.
Laguna Cartagena since 1930 has been a place where hundreds of cases were reported of flying objects coming and going from the area.
October 8, 2002, approximately 9 p.m., Puerto Rican police officer and Project Argus member Carlos Torres witnesses a red glowing USO fly out of the waters of Laguna Cartagena at an incredible speed. Then it stops and hovers just above the water.
I was a witness of an object suspended over Laguna Cartagena. The military got involved because they were also witnesses. The object flew away and then back from Monte Indio. And it stopped and hovered over Laguna Cartagena.
After hovering for several minutes over the area, the object was seen to crash back into the lake. Another Argus member, Giuseppe Quiñones, believes he captured the same object on videotape in 2004.
I took a video on November 20th, 2004, in the immediate area of Laguna Cartagena.
Seen for the first time, possible video evidence of a USO near this enigmatic lake. The brightly lit, craft-like object was seen emerging from the water. Here, it hovers for almost 1 minute before flying away.
In the mid-1990s, several attempts to disprove the USO activities were made, despite hundreds of witnesses that said they saw lights going in and coming out of the water. They have been seen all over Puerto Rico. Specifically, the most mentioned places are Laguna Cartagena and Route 303.
The region of Lajas, through which Route 303 runs, has been another source of significant USO and UFO reports, including a possible 1997 crash on Monte Indio that left behind a scorched earth impact zone and many unanswered questions.
In May 5, 1997, a UFO crashed there, burned many lands on the top of the mountains, and there was federals that night, and they obtained something that we don't know, a UFO.
After this 1997 incident, local government officials began to take USO and UFO reports more seriously. As a direct result, the mayor of Lajas, Puerto Rico, recently designated the roadway through the heart of Puerto Rico's UFO country as UFO Route 303. But for now, other USO-related events around the island are far more pressing for experts. In the hills around Lajas, a mysterious government aerostat, a tethered balloon-borne radar, is frequently launched up to 3 miles in the air, ostensibly to monitor air traffic and weather. However, USO researchers believe the balloon's real function is actually covert, to observe and record UFO and USO activity.
There is a government document in the legislature where a secret investigation was conducted. Not public, but secret, about the USO events in the waters. But the document states that they do not pose any danger to humanity.
The volume of USO reports from around this small island have prompted many to speculate that the deep waters directly below the southern tip of the Bermuda Triangle, just offshore, conceal more than USOs. Experts and researchers from around the world believe they possibly obscure a major USO base as well.
It is suspected that there's a base between La Paguera in an area near Cabo Rojo. It is also supposedly very deep and cavernous, and it goes as far as Laguna Cartagena.
The motive for them coming in and out of the water is so that they are able to enter in one area and come out in a different area in the underwater bases.
Could all of these events simply be tied to local mysticism, or perhaps the cultural sway of the Bermuda Triangle?
In Puerto Rican culture, the majority of the people here, even though they talk about the Chupacabra and the Bermuda Triangle, they do not believe in any of this.
Or is there possibly something more?
It's a reality. The USOs in Puerto Rico are real. There are hundreds of testimonies and witnesses. It's all real.
I think that the UFO phenomenon is real. Here in Puerto Rico, there have been hundreds of cases. That is a reality.
Coming up, possible photographic evidence of a USO exiting the waters of Gulf Breeze, Florida. It is believed that unidentified submerged objects are able to move through our oceans and seas in ways that defy all principles of modern physics. Experts are confounded by the ability of these vessels to reportedly travel at extreme depths, pass through ice with impunity, and traverse water at supersonic speed.
These kinds of craft, ostensibly, can travel underneath the water because they are impervious to water, just like they're impervious to gamma rays, cosmic rays, impervious to anything that gets in the way of their traveling in space.
According to all information, we are dealing with a very advanced technology.
They circle ships and next thing you know, dive into the water. It's not a barrier to them. They just go from one medium to another.
In late 1969, while conducting their regular Operation Deep Freeze ice-breaking exercises near Antarctica, U.S. Navy sailors aboard the USS Calcaterra reportedly witnessed an unidentified submerged object with some extraordinary capabilities.
Ivan Sanderson in Argosy magazine, where he talks about an event somewhere in the Arctic when an object came up through the ice and took off. Really sort of burrowed its way through
a large submarine-shaped object at least 100 feet long is seen bursting out of the frozen ocean through several yards of solid ice at an incredible speed. But this case, however, is only one of many similar incidents reported by navies around the world.
I know of one case that occurred near Leningrad. In the winter of 1976, a USO broke down through the ice, maneuvered underwater, and then again broke back out through the ice.
They do melt ice. Now, if you had a meteor, the dynamics of the thing would break the ice into chunks and scatter them all over the place. With a UFO, it's a clean hole.
USO witnesses have also reported seeing waterspouts beneath USOs as they exit the water, including Ed Walters, a resident of Gulf Breeze, Florida, who snapped this never-before-seen Polaroid picture of what appears to be a USO above a tornado-shaped waterspout on July 7th, 1988.
So he was looking north towards Gulf Breeze across the Santa Rosa Sound, a distance of about 7,000 feet. He noticed that the water down beneath the object started to get all foamy or something. He could see it dancing around, and all of a sudden this column of water went up and contacted the bottom of it. The picture that he took actually shows that.
Such cases have caused some experts to assert that USOs might possibly use water as a fuel source.
There are those who feel that water is essential for the fusion process.
There are a lot of cases where UFOs hover over reservoirs and small bodies of water, not only large bodies of water. It does seem to be some evidence that they can use water to help their craft in some way.
They may use water as a fuel. In these cases where they talk about objects hovering over the water and seeming to suck water up in, certainly sounds like they need a big drink or something to keep going.
Modern scientific theories abound about how USOs develop the ability to propel themselves through water with great efficiency. Researchers envision everything from massive jet-like propulsion systems to frictionless bubbles that cocoon the objects.
So the engines wouldn't be engines as you and I would imagine engines. They would be generators, generating a magnetic force, creating a magnetic envelope around the craft that repels the Earth's natural magnetism, hence allowing them to accelerate, decelerate, climb, fall, and navigate through the water.
By exerting forces at the surrounding fluid, seawater, nice electrically conducting fluid, you control the drag, you control the flow, the speed, the lift. You can get around all the problems of high-speed motion under the water. A magneto-aerodynamic system would work similar to the electromagnetic submarine that was successfully tested.
An electromagnetic submarine was in fact built and tested by the University of California, Santa Barbara in the mid-1960s. It took advantage of saltwater's natural ability to conduct electricity.
The first successful test of an electromagnetic propulsion system was conducted on Earth in 1966, when this electromagnetic submarine was first demonstrated. This electromagnetic submarine moves through the water as a result of electromagnetic forces. It has absolutely no moving parts.
The principle here is that seawater is an electrically conducting fluid. You push against the seawater by Newton's laws, elementary physics, it pushes back, and off you go.
Is it possible that USOs take advantage of this natural capability of our oceans to reach supersonic speed?
Water is a great magnetic conduit. In fact, if they were traveling using a process called diamagnetism, which is a weak repellent force, then water would enhance that force, which would explain why these craft are able to navigate in water so well.
Desert for testing atomic weapons. In the spring of 1955, grid number 51 was chosen to test another type of weapon.
Area 51 came about largely thanks to the Lockheed Company, which was doing a lot of secret work post the Second World War and needed a very remote and secure location to test its then top-secret spy plane projects.
Lockheed Aeronautics engineer Kelly Johnson enlisted a friend to help him find a suitable location to develop their new spy plane. Test pilot Tony LeVere, the man who some say is the true father of Area 51.
I told Kelly in simple words, I know exactly what you want, and I'll get right with it, which I did. I'm searching for the perfect dry lake, because I knew that a dry lake is the best natural landing field for experimental flying that ever was devised.
When LeVere and his team came across the area around Groom Lake, he knew he had found the spot.
This thing is, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 plus. The rest of them don't even stand a chance. Its location was really out in a godforsaken country, and not very many people roam around those parts.
Within a few weeks, Area 51 had become the U.S. government's most top-secret test facility. The first project to be tested, the U-2 spy plane. Equipped with highly sensitive cameras and infrared sensors, the U-2 was capable of producing detailed aerial images of enemy installations from altitudes as high as 70,000 feet, far beyond the range of enemy radar.
From the very beginning, the U-2 was a CIA-operated spy plane. And the way our government decided to cover the fact that it wasn't truly a spy plane is they said it was used for weather reconnaissance.
For over 4 years, the U-2 flew dozens of missions over the USSR, gathering vital photographic information about the Soviets' military capabilities. But in May of 1960, the U-2 program came crashing to Earth.
Secret reconnaissance of Russia by high-flying American U-2 jets ended when one was downed deep in Soviet territory. Its pilot, Francis Powers, was made the subject of a showcase trial.
A Soviet court convicted Francis Gary Powers of spying and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. He was later exchanged for a Soviet agent, but U-2 flights over the USSR were ended. Although the U-2 incident was a severe setback for the U.S. government, the spy plane had provided invaluable information during the Cold War.
Without images coming from the U-2s, we would not have known that the Soviet Union was moving intermediate-range ballistic missiles into Cuba. It proved what the Soviet Union had and what they didn't have prior to satellites coming into operation.
But the U-2 was not the last secret plane to be tested at Area 51.
After the U-2, a number of other secret spy plane projects were tested at Area 51. The next most demanding one technologically was another Lockheed program called the A-12, which was a CIA program for a very fast-flying Mark III, that's 3 times the speed of sound, spy plane.
The A-12 and its successor, the SR-71, became known as Blackbirds. Both could reach altitudes above 85,000 feet and cruise at 2,150 miles an hour.
One of the reasons the Blackbird program was so secret is we didn't want the Soviet Union to know what we had the capabilities of doing. We had the ability, on demand, to overfly any airspace in the world as long as politics didn't get in the way.
During this time, there were other aircraft being tested at Area 51. Strange objects in the skies above Groom Lake, alien spaceships, or secret military projects. Truth is stranger than fiction. Next on Unsolved History. Ironically, the very secrecy that surrounds Area 51 has created a fertile breeding ground for rumors of UFOs.
The reason people are fascinated with Area 51 is the simple fact that the United States government, our government, was paid by our taxes. continues to deny the existence of Area 51.
For years, amateur UFO watchers had reported sightings of strange, wedge-shaped objects cutting through the skies above Groom Lake.
The mystique about Area 51 really started growing in the mid-1980s when there were a lot of spooky airplanes or spooky sightings in and around the Nevada test site.
Word began to spread throughout the UFO community that these were alien spacecraft. The truth was nearly as surprising as the rumors. An aircraft that defied belief.
In the mid-1970s, a number of organizations, but principally Lockheed, got the idea that you could significantly reduce the radar cross-section of an aircraft down to the size of something approaching a small bird or even an insect.
The name for this new technology was stealth, aircraft practically invisible to radar. The prototype for the stealth plane was codenamed Have Blue. The Have Blue design incorporated angled surfaces or facets to break up the radar reflection. A later program called Tacit Blue utilized smooth contour shapes for the same effect.
Tacit Blue was a technology demonstrator developed by Northrop to prove that they could build and develop a low observable aircraft without faceting. It was a blended shape where they can control the shape precisely.
The Have Blue and Tacit Blue projects evolved into America's most top-secret aircraft to date. The B-2 stealth bomber and the F-117 stealth fighter.
You have to bear in mind that here was an aircraft that was being tested and deployed in secret. It was vital that no one got to see it.
The F-117 utilized special composite materials and faceted surfaces to absorb and deflect radar, enabling the plane to fly undetected. To a casual observer, the craft might indeed appear otherworldly.
The first time I ever saw an F-117, I thought for sure the airplane was changing shape, just because of the way it's faceted and the way the light was glinting off of it. And I just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. If an untrained person saw an F-117 for the very first time and saw it head on, it would look like a flying saucer. And the thing about it, if you can't explain what it's up there, if you look up in the sky and you see something and you can't identify it, it's an unidentified flying object.
In January 1991, the F-117, developed over years of secret flights in and around Area 51, was put to the test during the First Gulf War. The B-2 and the F-117 have since become vital components of American air power. Both planes saw action during the Bosnian conflict, and again in 2003 during the invasion of Iraq. But as our military is called upon to fight a new kind of war, new weapons have been developed and tested at Area 51. Recently, we caught a glimpse of the future of warfare. Unmanned aircraft. In Afghanistan, the Air Force RQ-1 Predator, an unmanned aircraft equipped with surveillance cameras, scoured locations too dangerous for troops. Since then, the Predator has taken on an offensive role. Equipped with Hellfire missiles, unmanned assault aircraft will enable the soldier of the future to engage the enemy without placing himself or herself in harm's way. But are these planes the only types of experimental craft being developed at this remote base? For years, there have been rumors that alien spacecraft have been reverse engineered at Groom Lake. Next, we go inside Area 51 on Unsolved History. The secrecy that surrounds Area 51 has created a subculture where nothing is too strange to be believed.
Ironically, even though this base does not officially exist, it's probably the most famous air base in the world, and you get a lot of people just turning up, wanting to know what's behind those hills. When you go to a place like Area 51, you have to be very mindful of what you're going to see, because inevitably people go there with preconceptions. They see what they want to see when they're around Area 51. If you're a UFO nut, you're going to see a UFO. It's just one of those places. It's a place which engenders fascination, and it's a place that triggers the imagination.
The curious who descend upon this remote location, however, will find it difficult to actually get that close to Area 51.
The base itself is behind a range of mountains. There's a very discreet roadway leading up to the base. You could drive past it and you wouldn't notice that anything was there. But if you stray over a kind of invisible line where the security forces know you're getting too close for comfort, then security can swing into operation. There are signs when you get really close to the base telling you that those armed guards have the authority to use lethal force if required. There are helicopters which patrol the area and can flush out people in the desert if they get a little bit too close. There are all kinds of security cameras and sensors which warn the authorities of unwarranted approach.
At one time, it was possible to get a look at the base by climbing the nearby mountains. But in 1995, the government withdrew access to public lands that surround the facility and declared the most popular observation points off limits. Today, the day-to-day operations at Groom Lake are still cloaked in secrecy, though it is still a very active site.
Facility that employs anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500 people on any given day. They had flights going out of Palmdale, out of McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, and out of Hill Air Force Base. So you have people coming in from all directions. You have buses that go in there with workers every morning. It's a very, very busy place.
Well, of course, if you work at Area 51, which is a base that does not exist, you have to be completely silent about your activities there. That's the whole point. You don't discuss these projects at all. You don't just discuss working on them. You don't discuss the existence of these programs. And that is essential.
There is only so much you can see from the ground. But there is another perspective of Area 51. Global Security is a non-profit Virginia-based think tank that analyzes satellite images of military and industrial installations from around the world. We asked them to examine a satellite photo of Area 51 and evaluate the expansions and improvements that have occurred since 1968.
You can see the change that's taken place at this base over this period of time. The most significant portion of this is the addition of the new runway right here. The original runway at Groom was 18,000 feet long, which is almost twice as long as a normal commercial international airport runway. And the reason for all that overrun is with the SR-71 test program, they wanted to have lots of extra space in case they lost the brakes or something went wrong. And you can see in the new image that there was an extension sometime in the 1970s or 80s. And then in the early 90s, an entirely new runway was built.
This new runway is the longest in the world. Why has it been built at Area 51? Is it possible that it was designed to accommodate a new top-secret spy plane? A plane the government claims does not exist. In 1991, there was a series of unexplained sonic booms in the Southern California area, literally shaking windows. Seismologists estimated that the aircraft that produced the booms were flying between Mach 3 and Mach 4, up to 4 times the speed of sound. During this period, there was also a dramatic surge in reports of strange-looking, fast-moving aircraft around Groom Lake. At the same time, the Air Force abruptly canceled the SR-71 Blackbird program. Was the SR-71 scrapped in order to make room for a more advanced replacement?
Some people believe that a spy plane called Aurora replaced the SR-71. Rumors have it that this aircraft was developed in secret, was extremely high-flying, fast-flying.
In the early 1990s, Aviation Weekly published reports of an aircraft observed in the night sky at extremely high altitude. Could this be the Aurora?
The Aurora is thought to fly as fast as 8,000 miles an hour, or about Mach 12, and an altitude is somewhere in the neighborhood of between 150 and 225,000 feet. From Area 51 to New York City on an Aurora-type aircraft would be in a matter of about 10 minutes. That's pretty fast.
But to date, government officials insist that the Aurora is a myth, and that the rumors about Aurora began with a misunderstood code name for a top-secret budget account.
All of a sudden, somebody sees an account called Aurora with hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion. Wow. Now the speculation starts. This plane is being developed that's from alien technology. The fact is that Aurora does not exist.
There is absolutely no evidence that Aurora exists beyond some circumstantial evidence that the US Air Force needs something to replace the SR-71 Blackbird.
But others insist that the Aurora is real. According to James Goodall, Lockheed's Ben Rich indicated that there was in fact such a plane.
Ben Rich was the retired president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, so he was a man in the know. I also had friends at Pratt & Whitney who confirmed that there was, in fact, an Aurora-type aircraft had been flown along with a mother airplane, and it was designed for, one, reconnaissance, but also for verification of nuclear proliferation.
We were not able to substantiate James Goodall's claims about these alleged statements. But whether it exists or not, the Aurora has enhanced the mystery and intrigue surrounding Groom Lake and Area 51. But is it possible that other secret aircraft from Area 51 may be responsible for a string of UFO sightings? When we return, strange triangular objects in the night sky. Experimental aircraft or alien spacecraft? Next on Unsolved History. Area 51 has long been associated with strange sightings in the sky. Is it possible that a secret project at Area 51 could be responsible for reports of large triangular-shaped UFOs? Beginning in 1989, thousands of witnesses in Belgium reported seeing a triangular craft with 3 bright white lights and a blinking red light in the center. A similar sighting occurred in Arizona on the night of March 13, 1997. A large V-shaped object was observed traveling on a southeasterly course over the state, passing over Phoenix at about 8:30 p.m. Although seen by hundreds of people throughout the state, only one known videotape exists of this phenomenon. It was shot by a retired pilot from the front yard of his home in Scottsdale, northeast of Phoenix.
At about 8:28 that evening, I was outside with my video camera and happened to look up, right about up in there, and saw a formation of lights moving from north to south. The V formation that flew over consisted of between 5 and 6 amber lights only, but it was totally silent, completely and totally silent.
Although this is the only actual videotape of the formation, other witnesses throughout Arizona reported seeing the UFO that evening. Artist Tim Lee created this image of the strange craft that passed over his home in central Phoenix.
The right arm of the object went directly over this house, over the property, and the left arm of that was probably about 2.5 blocks over in that direction. So when it came over, it pretty much dominated this whole quarter of this little valley up here.
3 years later, on January 5th, 2000, a similar event occurred in southern Illinois. Around 4 a.m., a series of calls began streaming into the regional 911 center in Belleville, approximately 18 miles southeast of St. Louis, Missouri.
I just received a call from Highland PD. Reference to a truck driver just stopped in and said there was a flying object in the area of Lebanon. It had white lights and red blinking lights, and it was last seen southwest over Lebanon.
All in all, 6 eyewitnesses, including 4 police officers, reported seeing a huge flying object.
The witnesses' description of what they saw is not entirely consistent, but the predominance seems to be that they saw some sort of a triangular-shaped vehicle with really, really bright lights on it.
Scott Air Force Base is located in the middle of the object's flight path. According to spokesman, however, the UFO could not have been a military aircraft from Scott.
Checking with our experts who work at airfield operations and the control tower, we found that our airfield was closed during that time. Our control tower was closed, so there was no way that there could have been an aircraft operating in and out of Scott Air Force Base, and that there was no military tie to this sighting.
According to published reports, there was some speculation that the UFO was in fact a B-2 stealth bomber from Whiteman Air Force Base, over 200 miles away. But the B-2 bomber does not exhibit the flight characteristics described by the witnesses, such as the ability to hover. So what else could it have been? Is it possible that the object may have been a secret military aircraft, a so-called stealth blimp?
There's been rumors for a long time about a stealth blimp, and Lockheed actually has a patent for a large triangular-shaped, low-observable, lighter-than-air craft. So some of the craft they've seen, could in fact be one of these stealth blimps or stealth dirigibles. Some of them are really huge. Now, over Hampton, Virginia, in the 1980s, there was one they estimated was over 1,000 feet long. It was bigger than an aircraft carrier, but it made no noise.
But others are not convinced that these are just experimental military aircraft, especially when they perform maneuvers that defy belief.
Just not enough evidence to convince me that it was tactical aircraft or something from another world. It's somewhere, it could be somewhere in between. I mean, there's just no way for me to know.
The truth behind these strange flying objects remains a mystery. Whether they were optical illusions, experimental aircraft, or of an unexplained origin. When we return, a mysterious object crashes into a ravine in Pennsylvania. Could there be an Area 51 connection? Next on Unsolved History.
That's it.
Could a secret project at Area 51 be behind a famous UFO incident? According to newspaper accounts, on the evening of December 9th, 1965, hundreds of people in the United States and Canada reported seeing a brilliant fireball arcing across the sky. The Greensburg Tribune-Review reported that several witnesses said that the fiery object crashed into a wooded ravine in western Pennsylvania, near the hamlet of Kecksburg. Some residents, including William Bush, claimed to have seen the object that fell into the ravine.
I went up there and I looked at it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It looked like an acorn to me, but yet it was a little longer. I'd say about as big as a Volkswagen, maybe a little bit longer than a Volkswagen, you know. You could get at least 2 or 3 men in it. I mean, to set maybe 2 comfortable.
According to published accounts, military personnel cordoned off the area. Some witnesses claimed the object was taken away on a flatbed truck.
Saw this flatbed truck come out of the woods with this object on it. And I could see it. It was copperish looking, had the hieroglyphics around the bottom of it, which was like a bumper shape, you know, it was rounded off. Like an acorn sitting on maybe a tower, you know, a big round tower.
However, the military claimed that nothing was found in the woods that night. This was in line with the official explanation.
Officially, it had now been declared that people had been mistaken. Nothing had fallen into the woods. People had seen a bright meteor in the sky, and that's how the report officially is as of today.
But several witnesses claim to have seen the object, and their descriptions are remarkably consistent.
What they describe basically is a large metallic acorn-shaped object that is approximately 10 to 12 feet or more in length and about 8 to 10 feet or so in diameter, semi-buried in the ground.
Could this strange object, allegedly seen by dozens of people, have been a downed spacecraft?
One of the most common explanations for the Kecksburg event has been the theory that it was Cosmos 96, which was a Russian spacecraft that was designed to land on the planet Venus. And during its mission, there was a problem, and it re-entered Earth's atmosphere.
The Cosmos 96 lander, however, fell to Earth more than 12 hours before the Kecksburg object.
Cosmos 96 re-entered the Earth's atmosphere at about 3:18 a.m. that same date in Canada. Now, the event in Kecksburg happened about 4:47 in the afternoon. So, that being the case, we have to wonder more and more what exactly it was that may have fallen.
Some have theorized that object might have been the engine or nacelle from an A-12 or SR-71 Blackbird, which had disintegrated during a test flight. The Unsolved History team decided to perform an experiment. First, we asked graphic designer Patrick Martin to prepare some renditions of various types of space debris, as if they had crashed into the ravine. In one drawing, he used the engine housing from an SR-71 as the object. In another, he substituted the image of the landing module from the Cosmos 96. Then, historian-in-residence Daniel Martinez showed the artist's renditions to some of the Kecksburg eyewitnesses.
So I'm going to just give you these. I'm going to give you one by one, and you take as much time as you want to look at them and say it either looked like this or it didn't look like this.
First, Daniel shows William Bullabush some renditions of an SR-71 engine housing.
Another one here for you. Nope. Here's another.
No.
Then he shows him the rendition of an SR-71 engine itself.
This is pretty close here. This didn't have the writing on the back.
Okay.
No, this
a little similar, but not exact.
Yeah, it's not in a point like, you know. Now this here's
a little bit closer.
Oh yeah.
Next, Daniel showed the artist's renditions to witness Jerry Betters.
I'm going to lay these artist impressions in front of you. I want you to look at them as long as you like and tell me what you see.
No.
Okay. Another one for you here.
Closer.
Closer? Okay, we'll put that in the closer pile. Here's another.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one. Okay, that's in the...
That's it. If it was upright, that would be it. It's pretty damn close, you know.
Our eyewitness picked the Soviet space capsule as being the best match for the object he saw on the back of the flatbed truck in 1965. This would seem to eliminate the likelihood that the Kecksburg object was the engine from a Blackbird.
Have a part off a Blackbird to have crashed in Pennsylvania, I'd have to say no. There's no way it could happen. But after looking at the illustrations, is it part of a satellite? Is it a part of an extraterrestrial object? Very possible.
But if it was a Soviet spacecraft, where would it have been taken?
If some foreign aircraft, let's say a Soviet aircraft, had flown into the United States and landed normally there, then it would be taken to a place like Area 51 for analysis and test, because being a remote location, it would be an ideal place to test that aircraft.
4 decades have passed, and the local residents still debate what, if anything, fell near Kecksburg that day.
Now, of course, as a researcher, I'm continuing to look into the possibility that it could be other man-made projects that we don't have any knowledge of at this point. But we cannot eliminate the possibility that this object could be of extraterrestrial origin.
We may never know the truth about the Kecksburg UFO, whether it was indeed a meteorite, a Soviet space probe, an SR-71 engine, an experimental military airplane, or, unlikely as it may seem, an alien spacecraft. Next on Unsolved History, the truth about alien UFOs at Groom Lake, and what the future holds for Area 51. Area 51 is still an active military facility, and the weapons of the future are still being developed and tested at this remote site.
The last technology that we know was tested at Area 51 was essentially stealth technology, and we know that testing has gone on to kind of build it's almost like a Klingon cloaking device system to make aircraft more invisible to the human eye. One way you can make an aircraft less easy to spot with the naked eye is to coat it with an electrochromatic kind of polymer, which effectively, when coupled to sensors, can tell the aircraft what background it's flying against. So if you're on the ground and looking up, the sensors on the aircraft would register that the aeroplane is flying against a blue sky background. And so it will signal to the polymers below the aircraft that they should mimic the sky. So effectively what you're seeing is a chameleon-like thing that is flying through the air, shimmering a little like the Predator in that movie.
Oh, yeah. Floating. Yeah, it does. It looks like it's floating, but it's changing shape.
But what about the rumors of alien spacecraft being tested at Area 51? In recent years, Bob Lazar, the man who claimed to have worked at a location near Area 51, has withdrawn from public life. His stories about having reverse-engineered alien spacecraft have largely been dismissed by government officials and the mainstream media.
Lazar's credibility was broken down pretty bad. He never worked up there. He never worked for Los Alamos or in any of the labs in New Mexico. He may have been up there, but he didn't work for the government. He worked maybe for a private contractor. But no one up there at Area 51 or any place in the labs acknowledges that any spaceship really existed.
But some still defend Lazar's credibility.
The question is, are there alien craft or alien beings at Area 51? The answer to that is no. But if you believe Bob Lazar, which I do, then there are alien spacecraft and possibly alien beings at the S4 location, which is the southwest corner of the Papoose Range.
In August 1997, after decades of denials, the CIA made a shocking admission. Thousands of UFOs reported by eyewitnesses were actually covert test and reconnaissance flights.
UFOs are a very handy smokescreen if you want to hide top secret stuff behind them. And you don't get anywhere more top secret than Area 51. So the legends that surround Area 51 are going to be very handy for someone who wants to engender a bit of disinformation to go and do a bit of spinning. Perfect.
Still, some believers persist that the admission by the CIA is nothing more than their latest bit of disinformation, intended to cover up the truth about Area 51.
Why do they keep Area 51 a secret? Because they feel if they deny it enough, people will believe them and say it doesn't exist. It's the worst kept secret in the history of the United States government. And until they open the facility up to the media, the mystique will still stay there, and people will still be wondering what's really at Area 51.
Even now, the secrecy that surrounds Area 51 makes it difficult to separate fact from fiction.
Well, the reasons why the government keeps Area 51 secret is something of a mystery to somebody like me. I suppose from their perspective you could say that so much secret stuff has been going on there for so long, it's very difficult for them to come out and say, we were lying, there is a base there, it's been there for ages, and by the way, there's an awful lot of secret technology stuff going on there too. Once you start to unravel that onion, who knows how many layers further you have to go. So I think it's kind of convenient to them just to keep quiet about it and downplay its existence. Bear in mind that this was a base that for most of its existence has not officially existed, but it is the most famous or infamous, and because of the investment that the Air Force and other agencies have there, I suspect it will be in business for a very long time.
For now, Area 51 remains a place shrouded in mystery, a place where reality is incredible and the incredible is real, a place where legends and myths are born.